Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's 1 o'clock, so I'll call the meeting to order. Kia ora tātou. We have, thank you for your attendance. We have some apologies, which I will do first, and then we'll go to the public forum. The apologies have been received from the Mayor, Dave Cole, Councillor Van der Vis, Councillor Hawkins, Councillor Peat and Councillor Calvert. Any further apologies?
Mr Chairman, I do need to leave by 2:30 and I appreciate that you won't be still dealing with planning and regulatory, but could it just be noted that I need to leave or ask for early departure?
I'll leave that in the hands of our colleague. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll be finished before then. I'll move that those apologies be sustained. Those in favour, seconded, Councillor Wilson. Those in favour, please say aye. Good to know that's carried. I'm sure you'll all join with me in sending our best wishes to Mr Hawkins. I can advise that the aeroplanes have been delivered by my daughter, but unfortunately he's been bumped off the surgery list until tomorrow or the next day. But he's in good spirits. All right, I'll invite, we have a number of people wanting to talk to us at the public forum about the camping bylaw, Freedom Camping Bylaw. Rhys Owen, Alistair Morrison and Neil Kennedy, and we also have Gerard Collins here in the audience, and when we get to number 5 I'll ask Gerard to come up to the table. He wants to join us, and I'll move that with those qualifications and information that we confirm the agenda as it stands, seconded by Councillor Noon. Those in favour please say aye. Aye. Against no. That's agreed. Thank you. Now Mr Owen, would you like to come up please? Welcome. Thanks for the documents you've tabled. When you ask me to, I'll pass them around for people to have a look at. And you've got 5 minutes, and then if you're okay with that, people will have the opportunity to ask questions after that.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you.
So my name is Rhys Owen. I live at Warrington and have done for 10 years, and I'm located closest to the Domain. As you're aware, DCC currently has 2 sites for non-self-contained freedom camping, being Warrington and Ocean View, and I'm suggesting to the Council that they should consider moving to non-self-contained, directing non-self-contained vehicles to campgrounds and making it self-contained only for freedom camping. Now, the reasons that I'm suggesting this is that last summer Warrington became overcrowded. We had up to 100 vehicles per night, and it's estimated if 2 or 3 people per vehicle, we were getting in excess, sometimes in excess of 200 people camping in the Warrington Reserve. And we had just 3 toilets to start with to cater for this number of people. Portaloos were brought in, but it's a huge increase in the number of people in the community and on that grass area. Over summer, the reserve was full of vehicles, so the community couldn't use that recreational reserve for sport because it was totally full of vehicles. And those photos that we'll pass around, you'll see that there's no room left for the community. So you might as well just pass them around and have a look. Now that we're in winter, the ground conditions have got wet and the grass has all been churned up. And so again, it's not suitable for any of the community to use the area. It's just turned into a muddy bog. The DCC bylaw that was brought in last year states that campers must park on gravelled or sealed parking areas. So I've included an extract there. So the bylaw states that campers must park on gravelled or sealed parking areas. Nationally, I've looked into the numbers, I've gone into all the council bylaws nationally, and I found that 70% of councils nationally have now banned non-self-contained vehicle freedom camping. So nationally, councils are moving towards self-contained only freedom camping. And you would have seen in the paper, Waitaki District Council is now looking at doing the same. They're looking at banning non-self-contained freedom camping. And so generally there is a trend nationally towards this. I've talked to the DCC staff about how they're going to address the issues of overcrowding at Warrington and the parking issues at Ocean View, and they're moving towards trying to find other locations, but I understand they're struggling to find anywhere else, especially before the summer, that will take the burden off Warrington. So the DCC staff have done a good job on addressing the symptoms of this issue. So they've put some signs in to help visitors know where to go in Warrington. They've added some road marking to try and make it safer with this huge increase in traffic volumes. They've added portaloos. As I said, 200 people for 3 toilets just doesn't add up. So they've added portaloos, they've put in extra rubbish, but in my view, they're just addressing the symptoms. Now, as you can see in the photos, we've now also got extensive grass repairs needed at the recreational reserve. That's not included in the current report. So in my view, the council's doing a good job, but they're chasing their tails really with this. They've brought a bylaw in and they're just addressing the symptoms. I don't think it's sustainable long term, and I think looking at the big picture, the council should definitely consider moving to self-contained only, and all non-self-contained campers go to the campgrounds. Warrington Domain is a recreational reserve, it's not a campground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being so concise. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Rhys. What was it normally like, or a year ago at this time of the year after wet weather?
Okay. So there's some background to this area. In 2010, and leading up to 2010, we had problems with people doing rakis on the grass. So we put rocks in and gates so that this time of year it would be closed. So there'd be no vehicles going onto the domain. Now, since the gates went in and the rocks went in, the boy racer problem stopped, people stopped using it, and generally, yeah, it's in good condition. We never had the flooding that we've had, never the big ponding water, and yeah, nothing like this.
Are those one of these photos still got cars? Are people still camping there now?
Yeah, so we're consistently still getting 10 or 12 vehicles per night driving across the mud and parking there overnight.
And last question, I think. When we had this report first come to us and we had the aerial photo of the domain, I thought at the time it was hard to tell what was grass and what wasn't because it was not a particularly good cover anyway. But what I had thought there were patches of like sandy areas anyway.
Well, it's all based on sand, so it's a sand spit. So generally it's free draining, but there's no distinct gravel area to park. It's just a big open grass area.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lord.
Yeah, Rhys, I'd just like to ask the question. If you banned non-toileted vehicles, would that actually solve your problem? I haven't seen the photos until just now, but the problem that you're describing, a lot of that, whether they're self-contained or not, would be, surely the problems you've got are greater than whether a vehicle is self-contained or not self-contained.
Yeah, I've thought about that, and we've always had freedom camping at Warrington, so we've always, you know, before the bylaw came in and it was advertised it was a place to go, we always had vehicles going there. I think it's just the numbers of getting, you know, upwards of up to 100 vehicles a night driving over it, wearing the grass off over summer, and then still driving in. I think if we brought in the bylaw where it's self-contained only, we would maybe getting 2 or 3 a night in winter. And there's an area outside the rocks that they could park in. It was actually the rocks in 2010 were placed just in a certain way so that people could still freedom camp outside the domain. There's an area there for about 5 or so vehicles. So no, I don't think we would get the same problems. The numbers in summer may be 10 or 15 vehicles if we had self-contained only, and that's manageable. We can still use the recreational reserve for sport, and then in winter, yeah, that low number could still park outside.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Wiley.
So, Rhys, what percentage, I heard what your answer to Councillor Lord, what percentage would be non-self-contained and self-contained?
What we saw over summer is a lot of people drove away. Like you would get because the domain was quite full, campers would turn up and actually drive away. So they could actually go anywhere in the city pretty much. So they didn't, I think if I was driving a camper van and I pulled up to see 100 vehicles jammed in there like sardines, I would turn away as well. But I'd imagine in summer we would get maybe 10, 15 vehicles a night self-contained, and in winter maybe 2 or 3.
So you talked about 100 vehicles per night. So you're talking about a 15% ratio being self-contained, 85% non-self-contained?
Yeah, maybe 5 to 10%, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Actually, look, my question's to staff, but just to clarify something that you've said, you have said that in other jurisdictions that distinction between contained and non-contained has been made to prevent the non-contained, and we do that now. We say there are only a couple of places you can stay. I had thought, perhaps incorrectly, and staff may be able to clarify this, that under the legislation we couldn't make it absolutely impossible. We could define areas, but if you removed all areas that we would be in breach of the legislation. But you're telling me that other jurisdictions have done exactly that, and I'm just wondering if staff can clarify that.
Well, the staff aren't here. Oh, yes, they are. Can we just clarify that during the report rather than revisiting it several times? There's a specific comment referring to that in the report that's in front of us. Councillor McTavish.
Thank you. Thank you, Rhys. My question just relates to, I guess, the implications of banning non-self-contained vehicles from these specific areas. Is it your view that those people would head to a camping ground, or do you think that we'd just see more people parking up in random spots around the city? Because I think that was staff's concern, and that's why the bylaw as it currently stands provides specifically for those users.
It's a very difficult one to answer. I can give you some background. I took my 4 kids and my wife around the North Island freedom camping a few months ago in a camper van, self-contained. And a lot of areas we went, they've got those laws where non-self-contained have to go to campgrounds, and it was very restrictive on where we could actually park in our camper van. But we didn't find any people living out of the back of their cars in any of the sites that we went to. So we found it was, from what we saw, it was 100% adherence to the bylaw. Locally, DCC's got a lot of camping grounds. Like, we're a lot better than a lot of places up north that have sold their campgrounds. You know, they were on beachfront properties and sold them for mega $1 million. DCC's got some great campgrounds where these people could go. So I don't think we would have that problem. Well, I'd like to think we didn't. And I'd like to think these people would go to the campgrounds, pay the money, $20 a night to stay there. You know, the numbers in the report said 10,000 visitor nights of people freedom camping in Warrington for free. So that's 10,000 times, say, $20 a night. You're talking about some big dollars that the community would have got from people staying in campgrounds. Plus Warrington, you know, they can't spend money there. There's no shops, there's no bars, there's no pubs. We've got people who are about 25 years old. You know, they don't spend money on food. You know, they're eating 2-minute noodles. But if there was a bar nearby, like if they're staying in St Kilda, I know there would be a lot more money coming into the city through them going to restaurants and bars. That just makes sense to me.
All right. Thank you very much. And the issues around what the implications of the law are will clarify during the report when staff are here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Please, I'm sure you're interested to stay and listen to the others and the discussion on the report when we get there.
Yep. Thank you all.
Thank you. Alistair Morrison.
Good afternoon all.
Welcome, Alistair.
I thought it might be useful just to give you some detail of what the local community board members have been doing regarding the freedom camping on Warrington. Gerard will be up later on talking about the community board view itself. All the board members got an email from Rhys Owen on the 3rd of February with some photographs of toilet paper in the bushes and 55 vehicles there. The 3 local board members, Geraldine Tate, who lives in Warrington, and Mark Brown and myself, who live at the southern end in the Waitati area, we went down there and we had a really good look around the place. And it was very evident that the existing toilet block was inadequate for the numbers that were there. There are 2 toilet cubicles for ladies and 1 cubicle and a rather smelly urinal for gentlemen. That was inadequate, and the number of rubbish bins were also inadequate. We undertook from that day on some fairly earnest discussion with staff, and we ended up getting 4 portaloos placed at the southern end of the camping ground, and we're up to about 11 or 12 rubbish bins now, and these have been getting serviced daily, and that sort of got on top of the problem. At the same time, we started doing a daily head count, or a nighttime head count. Geraldine Tate's done most of that, and Brownie and myself have done a little bit. And the numbers that we've had, and these were daily numbers, I put them into a spreadsheet, which I then gave to staff, and you'll find that in Jendy's report. And we've averaged those out, and it is quite a staggering number of people. It's, if you include May, it's up to about 11,300 humans. And the question would have to be, if they weren't at Warrington, where would they be? And what would they be doing in bushes around the place? One of the other things that we found was a distinct lack of information signage, both directional signage on the road and information signage on the reserve itself. So we worked with staff to rectify that, and I was quite involved with some of the design of that. And the other thing that struck us, we got talking to a lot of the campers, and a lot of them, as Rhys says, are young folk, many of them from French and German-speaking countries. And one concern we have in Warrington is a restricted water supply. So I asked staff, and they have done that. We now have a sign up there in French and in German, as well as English, saying, look after our water, it's a restricted supply, please don't waste it. And that seems to be working. And having spoken to the young people, you know, when we go along and chat to these folk, that seems to be fairly well accepted. There may be a case for even more signage around the city in other languages than English, because speaking to some of these folk, they're sort of 19, 20, up to 25, and while their spoken English is fairly good, their written or their ability to read English, some of the terminology that we use might not be so great. And I don't think the term domain is something that you would find used in Germany or France or Switzerland. The reserve, they understand, but not the domain as such. It should also be recognised that it's not just freedom campers on the domain. On one day we went down there with over 100 teenage schoolgirls at the start of the school term, doing some sort of bonding session, 2 full bus loads of them, and over 100 girls there. For the minuscule toilet facilities was just, again, inadequate. On that particular occasion, the surf club opened up their facilities. The area also caters for surf carnivals from time to time, which brings a huge influx, but that's just generally in there on a Saturday and a Sunday, and away they go again. We looked at the idea of what could be done to make things better for the local people, and we were speaking with the eyesight people of how can the local communities benefit from the influx of campers. And as Rhys has said, there are no shops in Warrington. What did occur to us is to be able to put some signage up there saying, well, if you need groceries or petrol or the local attractions, then it's 7 minutes this way or 12 minutes that way, just to make sure people understand what is around. And there's an eco-sanctuary up the road, and there's this, that, and the next thing. That's something that could be looked at for next year. And we also looked at this concept of charging people, and that's something that you folk will be deciding, but quite how that would be administered and whether the administration costs would outweigh the revenue, we do not know. We did think that something that could be done is the likes of a sign saying, this is a wonderful ecological area, and this is what we're doing to protect it. If you feel like contributing towards that, then put your money in the box. Quite how you would make that totally secure and quite how you administer it all, I do not know. But that was basically what I wanted to say, that I think we've done fairly well since the beginning of February. I think it caught everyone by surprise, this large influx in numbers. We haven't a clue what it's going to do next year. I would say it's fairly evident that we could do with more freedom camping space. There is nowhere that the DCC owns or administers that jumps to mind straight away. During the Rugby World Cup in 2011, the Blueskin A&P Society made Bland Park available for self-contained freedom camping, just for the overflow when we had the matches in Dunedin at the stadium. And we ended up with maybe sort of half a dozen at maximum there, and we charged them $20 a night. but it's not really an ideal place because there are so many other things happen at Bland Park. So you can't sort of have 100 people in there and then go and chuck them all out for a football match. So I don't think that is actually a feasible place.
So we'll go to questions. Thanks, Alison. Thanks on behalf of colleagues for the work that you and your colleagues have done to make this work. And I think we'd all acknowledge the challenge is not going to go away. Questions anywhere? Councillor Wiley.
Alistair, has the community board spoken with the local campground and discussed the issues?
Ask Gerard.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wonder, Alistair, whether you have any views on the suggestion by Reece to restrict it to freedom camping that has got facilities on board?
The question I would ask, having had a look, and I visit there regularly, if you did that, where are all these other people going to go? A number of them do sleep in the back of their utes, but not all of them. A lot of them come in cars and they sleep in tents. If you ban that, it's not taking away the need or the desire for people to visit. And the young folk that we've spoken to from Europe are blown away with the whole of Otago, Dunedin, everything it's got to offer, New Zealand in general, and they're delighted that Warrington Reserve is there for them. So if you go and ban them, where do they go? Because just putting down a big axe like that isn't going to solve a bigger problem, I feel. Ah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Kennedy. Welcome. Have a seat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Here's the constraints. You've got 5 minutes. Any questions if you're happy about that?
I didn't quite hear you, but I think you were telling me to get cracking. Mr. Chairman, councillors, I endorse some of the words that have been spoken already, and they've covered some good points. I'd just like to elucidate a bit more on some of the things that have been said. We've got to be so careful here that we're not lumping everybody in together. I understand that we're talking about the low end of the market as far as freedom camping goes. It's a misnomer for a word for a start. We start with the top line of the self-contained vans, and they go right down to quite small vans, right down to what we call the worst part of the market, magic vans. And that's the worst part, the way that they conduct themselves, both on their vans and on their website. And if you have a look at the website, you'll see that they're telling all sorts of porkies about what you can do in New Zealand, and they forget about the fact that we're green and all that sort of thing. So the piece that we're really addressing is the car campers. They are the problem. They're non-self-contained, and that sort of goes up to the van. Some of these people are buying these vans at the airport, and they're swapping with their mates at the airport, and they take off around the country. One of the problems that councils have is that these guys are very savvy to the internet. They've all got their iPads on their phone, they've got all these directions, they can do it in the dark. And most of them do. If they're going to go somewhere and they haven't got a designated place as Warrington or Ocean View, they find on their iPad, and they come to all sorts of places. One of the concerning things about the comments that I've been making, and my fallback position is exactly the same as these guys. They go to camps. But if we don't do that, or we do that, the same thing is going to happen. They're going to go to all the spots around the country that they can part for nothing. They're not controlled. They were there before, not in such great numbers as they are now, and the numbers are not going to decrease, they're going to increase. We've got our tourist outfit, the airlines, they're all promoting themselves to bring these people to New Zealand, but they don't have any further responsibility. It's all lumbered on councils throughout the country. And I'm here to say that the 211 Act that we're talking about, the Freedom Camping Act, it's a disaster. It was made for a specific purpose and it hasn't been fixed. And I'm sorry, people, but you are the guys that should be talking to the government about this, because every other organisation is too small to do it. You've got I'm not sure what your overriding body is for all your councils, but that's the place that the government should be hearing from about these problems that we're addressing today, because they're never going to get any better. My understanding is that you can charge these people, and I noticed in the report it said some section there, 5(3) in brackets in the Freedom Camping Act, that you can't do that. If you've done due diligence, my understanding is you can do that. You can charge them. Right, to get to the nub of the problem, what do we do about it? We either find more land, because the way I see it, you really haven't got enough time this year to change what we've been doing. And we've got these grounds filling up, as you've heard, a disaster, really, for some of these local communities with their domain. So we either find more ground, or we put a blanket ban on straight away and face the consequences. And I'm not sure, there was a comment made, I'm not sure that's correct. I don't think you can do that. The Act still applies, and you are bound to provide facilities for these people. The part that gripes most ratepayers, and that's what I am, is the fact that they do it for nothing. There's no contribution, as was just mentioned by the previous speaker. They only spend a few bob on noodles, but if they went to the likes of Queenstown, which is in our area, but they spend their money quite happily on tourist events. They probably might go down the peninsula and spend their money there, but they're camping for nothing. If the same numbers we're talking about were paying a nightly fee, and don't ask me how you're going to get it unless you've got a controlled piece of ground, and that's the next step. If we can't accommodate them in the domain, if we had a piece of ground with a barrier arm on it, like a parking lot, different story. These guys would be paying their way. The only contribution they're making to the economy is when they buy a bit of fuel. Quite different from the other end of the market, where people do stop for 4 or 5 days in Dunedin. It benefits the whole city. All businesses benefit that way. You're all probably aware of the figures in relation to the expenditure each day of a van. So they're the sort of things. So the problem is, and no doubt you can discuss it today, what do we do about them? Because it was, quite terrible last year, as the people have talked about. And I agree, the domains are not for that purpose, but how do we finance a piece of ground outside the thing? How do we provide toilets? This is where you have to start thinking outside the square. If you go outside the drainage system, you need toilets. These guys are already, before you put them into these parks beside a toilet, they were already using the outside, under the trees, wherever they stopped. And that's the other problem. As soon as you take them, if we do take them out of these parks, no toilets, they're back to the old-fashioned way, under a bush.
Well, I think you're right, and it's not an easy problem, and you've canvassed a lot of the challenges that we have. Just before we go to questions, if you're happy to take them, I can tell you that our staff are in discussion with Local Government New Zealand, representing everyone, because the problems are certainly shared right throughout the country, and with as parts of government about how the Act needs to be modified, which Local Government New Zealand is advocating, because these problems, as you identify, are not going to go away. So, councillors, questions?
Thank you for that.
Any questions? All right, there appear to be none. Thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you very much.